All right, let's get this started. Been on a little bit of a hiatus. Been a little sick, but I'm doing all right. Anyway, I saw this whole MoistCritical fallout. I thought we'd be done talking about this, but I'm curious because he released a video about the situation. Good for him. I saw after he got some backlash about this topic, it seemed like it was really getting to him. You know, it feels like one of the only times he gets any like real significant backlash, and he was really struggling with it, which is interesting. Because I don't know, I've gotten my own fair share of backlash, and I'm not even close to his size, so it's kind of funny. He seemed to react to it a little poorly at first. I saw this little community post that he's like taking a break from the podcasts because he wants to be offline or online a little less. Sneako's taking this as a pretty epic W, even though Sneako has an incredibly bad take on like everything. But obviously, MoistCritical, Charlie, whatever, he could have expressed himself better. But let's just see what Mr. Critical, Mr. Moist has to say about the situation on the back end when we'll see what the reception is. I know a lot of people were upset with him because of like the whole trans conversation. But let's do this.
Betsy, what a week.
Whoa.
Heavens to Betsy, what a week, huh, sports fans? Holy Toledo. Yeah, so MoistCritical's in a big oopsie-poopsie situation here. It reminds me of the time in Moonfall when KC Houseman sacrifices himself and dies of cringe to become the moon. Yeah, so, being serious now, since this has become such a big issue, I've been in a lot of drama recently. I'm in hot water, and I'm biting on the fart bubbles that pop up in the bathtub here. It is a lot. So let's start with the most recent one today.
When he was streaming, people were calling him a pedo and a groomer in the trap. It's funny because Sneako's take is pedophilic and groomer adjacent, no? He literally said a 12-year-old and a 20-year-old can marry each other. Yeah, I don't even know what else to say. That's disgusting.
My retirement. I didn't know I was retiring. That's news to me. I'm as shocked as all of you are. I had a ton of fun last night playing a game called Clickleding, which is basically like a cuckoldry simulator, but for clicking against like the Lorax in a hotel room.
What?
And I just did like an old school gameplay commentary video. I was bubbly, full of jubilation. I posted it today only to learn that I'm just a big old fucking liar. Liar, liar, plants for hire, I suppose. Apparently, and I didn't know this until I posted the video, everyone was under the impression that I was quitting the internet. So I started scratching at the hair on my chinny chin chin, wondering when the
Yeah, I mean, I thought that too when I saw that podcast thing we had just looked at, because it said he was taking a break from the internet like indefinitely or something along those lines. So it gave people the impression that he was like taking a little bit of a break from posting in general. But that when you reread it though, you're like, oh, this just seems to be podcast oriented. So as long as they're physically mature. Well, Sneako doesn't believe that. So just to be clear, when Sneako says like, the age of physical maturity, he's not talking about the age of physical maturity. He's talking about the age when girls start their physical maturity, right? In general, people tend to start puberty generally around 12 or 13, and they usually finish their puberty around 16, 17 years old, right? So there is no instance where a girl or a boy or anybody is physically mature until they're at least 16 or 17. Now, obviously, I think most of us like to take into account mental maturity as well. You don't have to be fully mentally mature in order to consent as an adult, but you have to be mentally mature enough. You have to hit a particular threshold of intelligence, we'll say, and ability and agency over yourself in order to make informed decisions. They don't have to be perfect. I don't think you really age until like 25, but you don't have to be at that perfect mental maturity. But yeah, that's the factor there. But either way, Sneako doesn't like believe that. What Sneako is trying to do is he has a very bad, unreasonable, dangerous, pedophilic, and groomer-oriented take that is supported by like religion, to be honest with you. In older times where things were very different, people weren't living till the same time as they are now. And he's trying to make it come across as reasonable. It's something that his friend Nick Fuentes tries to do when he tries to talk about how black and white people shouldn't race mix. And then he'll say stuff like, I like black people, they're great, but they should just kind of be by themselves and stuff like that. And then in the behind the scenes, though, he talks about how black people and dogs are basically the same thing. It's disgusting shit, but it's a tactic. That's literally all it is. So he knows that he's unreasonable, but he tries to present it in a reasonable way so that stupid people that don't know how to read between the lines go, wow, this actually seems kind of reasonable. It's not. It never is. It's disgusting. It's unproductive. And if it was your kid, you would be outraged. So that's just the reality of the situation. And it's so funny that a lot of the people that will defend his take are, they're religious, or not even religious. They pretend to be religious online. But they tend to be, they'll support this opinion. But then they'll go and they'll call somebody who thinks that, like, a doctor and, decades of, material on gender dysphoria, it's somehow still grooming kids if they get treatment for their gender dysphoria. But like allowing a 12-year-old to be married and raped by a 20-year-old in a marriage, that's not abusive in some capacity. It's really never about kids. None of these perspectives are ever about kids in any actual meaningful capacity. It's always about what makes somebody comfortable. There's always going to be like a pretty significant levels of cognitive dissonance when it comes to these topics. So,
the fuck did that happen? Was I sleepwalking? Do I have somnambulism? Is this some kind of like, Fight Club situation? But instead of like Tyler Durden, I have fucking Charles Turden here that's just making wrong announcements. It turns out the patient zero behind all of this was a post Jackson made announcing that I would be leaving the podcasts, which is something I thought about periodically for quite a few months now, mainly because I started to recognize that I was becoming the very thing I'd make fun of with being chronically online. Like, I just was always online, and the podcasts were a big proponent of that, and I just kind of wanted to scale back the amount of time I spend online, so, and I kept Jackson in the loop the whole time here about where my head was at, and last week I told him, hey man, I think this is going to be where I hang up the jersey, you can put it in the rafters, throw it in the dumpster, but I think I'm just going to be, sailing off in the sunset here and just reducing the amount of stuff I do online.
I mean, it kind of makes sense. I'm sure Sneako had something to do with it. But at the end of the day, it makes sense. Just take a little bit of a break. Don't consume yourself fully, especially since he doesn't have to. I have pretty heavy boundaries with what I do online and offline too. So I'm not anywhere near as successful, but like, it's always good to not be terminally online. So it's helpful.
Which he completely understood. So he made the announcement just letting people know that. And then that got spun on Twitter and Reddit as MoistCritical's taking an indefinite hiatus and quitting.
Childhood HRT is kind of weird, though. Sure. I mean, I agree with the uncomfortableness. I've talked about this before. I'll talk about it again because we're in the topic, and I wouldn't expect you to go back and like watch my other videos on this. When the reality is that it's like gender dysphoria is something that we've observed for quite a while, right? We know that there are adults with gender dysphoria, and if you listen to those adults talk about it, their symptoms will say, or the way that they feel, it's always started when they were kids. And so now there's a conversation that people are having about identifying gender dysphoria in younger people and trying to make sure that they have positive outcomes. Personally, I don't think that anybody should hormonally transfer or get any surgeries until they're an adult. That being said, the data seems to suggest what we have right now, that there is age-appropriate HRT or hormonal solutions for young people that have gender dysphoria. And that if the gender dysphoria is noticed and identified correctly and treated correctly, that the outcomes are better overall. That's what it boils down to. Is it perfect? No. Like we don't have enough data long-term wise to know for 100% certain. But based on the data we do have, it's more likely that potentially going on puberty blockers and hormone treatments for young people with gender dysphoria is the right way to go. Right? I'm not a scientist. If I operated my life based on what made me comfortable and uncomfortable, I would be a stupid fuck. You have to, if you want to be an intelligent person, you have to understand that there's going to be times where you're not going to know. You have to be smart enough to know that you don't know. I don't know all the data, but I generally can trust the science on these topics. The mental health science, which is still relatively new, right? Mental health sciences are like emerging. They're newer. And that's what direction I'm going to lean into. I've seen people say like, oh, that's just an appeal to authority. I don't know how to talk to somebody who's debate-brained, but what I know is that if I go to my gastro doctor and they say you need an endoscopy, I'm going to go, okay, no problem. Or say like, oh, hey, you need to go on this medication because your heartburn's really bad and it can have a negative impact on your actual heart. Or I go to the doctor and they say like, hey, you need to take this medication. Your blood pressure is really high. I'll generally trust them because that's their fucking job. And it's like, what, I can be as uncomfortable as I want. I'm uncomfortable when I watch two dudes kiss. That's why I don't watch gay porn. But like, what do I do with that? Should we ban gay kissing? Obviously not, because then we have to ban lesbians too. And I love watching that. But like, if I operated my whole life based on what made me feel uncomfortable, rather than like what the truth was, I'd be stupid. I would be a dumb person. I'd be emotionally and literally and like physically and mentally unintelligent. And I just choose not to live my life like that. So that's what we're seeing in the data. It could change. The unfortunate reality is that we're not going to know until we do treatments like this, and then we collect data and we move forward with it. That's the only way we're really going to know. And it's going to lead to better outcomes in the future. And that's the reality. I've seen people tell me, and it's so interesting how dumb, not even dumb, it's just like people fall for the stupid shit. I had somebody in the comments talk about how, well, most people who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria as kids actually grow out of it. This is not true. I just need you to understand that this is not true. You're conflating people that are diagnosed with gender dysphoria and young people saying that they're trans, identifying as trans, whether it's because they want attention or because they're exploring their gender, or there's maybe a level of trending to it being like, I'm non-binary. That's not the same as somebody that's diagnosed with legitimate gender dysphoria. The detransition rates are between like 1% and 8% based on like all the data that we have. All right. People like, because they have legitimate diagnoses. Now, some of it could be because they were misdiagnosed. Some of it could, some of it could be because they've hit a level of transition where they start to detransition. They'll come off medication, or they want to have kids in the future, or they want to have kids at that point, so they detransition, right? But like, we're not seeing most people, because I've seen it's upwards of like 84% of people who identify or have gender dysphoria, they just go back to normal. No, that's not true. Identifying as trans because you're experimenting with your gender is not the same thing as getting a legitimate gender dysphoric diagnosis. Those are two profoundly different things. People need to understand that. And there's a lot of misinformation that goes around on this topic in general. There's just like a ton of misinformation that happens with this topic. And that's something that people need to identify with or understand. They need to identify. So people might think you're trans med. Why? Because I say, well, shut up. Nobody's going to think I'm fucking trans med. I don't care if you want to experiment with your gender. I don't give a shit. It's not something I care about. But we're having a legitimate conversation about gender dysphoria. People that identify as trans that don't have gender dysphoria, they don't go through hormone treatment. So I don't know. That's not trans med. So yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of misinformation going on when it comes to these topics of conversation. But that's just generally where I side on to.
Being the internet, fundamentally. Don't know when I'll be back. He's done with the internet because of all this controversy. Patooey on his grave. He's gone. When I mean, looking at the post, I don't even know where that's coming from. It's literally just talking about the podcast and me just stepping away. Like, it doesn't extend beyond that. I can't even wrap my tiny noodle around how anyone could perceive this as me being dumb.
I thought the data was showing the opposite, which is why so many countries moved away from it. Incorrect. So just to be clear, in England, there aren't so many countries moving away from it. In England, there is they are stopping new treatment, or they're stopping I think it's hormone treatment for new patients under like minor patients, not because the data says it's not helping, but because they don't feel like the data is conclusive enough to say that it absolutely is helping. And so what they're doing is they're allowing people that are on like HRT that are minors to continue to take it, then go through their treatment, and they're still allowing some people to go through more carefully observed clinical trials to go through these hormonal treatments, to have a higher level of watch on the people that are transitioning, the minors that are transitioning or going through gender confirmation treatment. I agree with that. I think that makes perfect sense. They're just being careful. They're not going in the opposite direction. They're trying to be careful about that. The data doesn't suggest otherwise in any meaningful capacity, right? You also have to keep in mind that there are also going to be some people in office that are uncomfortable, typically conservatives, with like when it comes to transitioning, then they will base all of their decisions 0% factual, and they will just go based on how they feel. Like in America, Conservative Party right now, it's the party of anti-science. They don't believe in climate control or climate change. They didn't believe in COVID. They don't believe in gender dysphoria. They don't believe in any of those things, and apparently they don't even believe in age of consent, according to Sneako. Okay, so when you have like these reactionary parties, like the conservative parties that are not reasonable, and they're not looking at the science, they're not identifying the science and trying to move forward correctly, it's hard to say like, oh, this is based on the science versus like, oh, this is based on their ideology, and they will justify it through like this, they will potentially use science, but they'll just like be like, no, I'm uncomfortable with this, so it can't be real, right? Just to be clear, you have to differentiate these different things.
Done with the internet entirely, but that's the story that they ran with, and that's what most people saw, not the actual post. So everyone thought I was quitting the internet, so
I mean, realistically speaking, conservatives are even like anti like economic science, if you want to call it that. You know, what was Trump's biggest thing? Let's cut taxes drastically for the rich, massively inflate our annual federal deficit for no reason, just to put a couple of bucks in people's pockets. It's nice when people get more money. They could have done the middle-class tax cuts, but that was never sustainable, right? So, like, there's really no... I don't think that there's a single take that's scientifically based in the Conservative Party right now, in America at least. I honestly couldn't I honestly couldn't tell you what scientific basis there is. You know, if conservatives are like, hey, listen, these issues might be real, but let's pump the brakes and do it slow. That's fair, but they're not saying that. You know, they're just saying no, these things aren't real. Like they're generally speaking. You know, it's not like they're like, hey, let's be a little bit more realistic or hesitant about gender dysphoria stuff, or let's do the same thing with climate control. No, it's just like, these things aren't real. Nothing matters, right? So
I posted that video that I was really happy with because it just felt like an OG old school video that made me happy. And then bang, just a flood of comments and dislikes all saying shit like, how could you fucking deceive us? I thought you quit, huh? What happened to leaving, huh? I just read this post on Twitter from an account that had a profile pic of titties photoshopped onto Thomas Edison that said you were done, and it had
I rather it on Thomas the Tank Engine.
50,000 likes, so I know it was true, and you're just a fucking liar. I can't even just peacefully walk away from some projects without it being a massive fucking reaction over actual nothing burger information.
This is retail.
And trust me, no one has a palate more refined for nothing burgers than me. I have ranted about the stupidest shit of all time, but this was mind-boggling even for me. So to set the record straight, no, I'm not retiring, despite what the experts are telling you. All I did was walk away from a couple of projects. Like, that's really it. Like, that's a pretty normal thing to do, especially when one of them I've been doing for, like, 8 years. I really didn't think it was that deep, especially not deep enough for how big of a story it's become with all of the wild narratives running around about the true reason that I stopped doing it. So let's get into...
Well, I mean, and I could be wrong, but it seems like he just kind of, like, burnt out a little bit. Talking to Sneako, he got, like, some backlash that he's not really used to getting backlash. MoistCritical seems to have... Like, he seems to have safer takes, and that's not necessarily a criticism, you know what I mean? I don't always have the safest takes. I'm not trying to have safe takes. I'm also not trying to have intense takes. I'm not looking for attention through having unsafe takes. But he seems to stick with safe takes, and then he talked about something he wasn't super informed on, and it was also a debate, you know, that Sneako had, and he's lost horrifically to Destiny consistently. It's very funny. And then, but, you know, so MoistCritical got, like, a little bit, you know... He got a little bit of nay on that, so I figured he needed a little break. I get it, the hate can be a little frustrating and annoying, so...
that drama. I've talked about it on stream, I don't even know how many times at this point, but we'll just talk about all of it in this video here.
Bro, I would play Season of Discovery or something if I had people to play with. Like, I'm playing retail because I have people to play with. That's really what it comes down to, and the new expansion's coming out.
So, when covering the Ava Tyson situation, I was attacked by a lot of people for not being quick enough. Even though I covered it within like the first 6 hours, people were unsatisfied that I hadn't made a video within like the first fucking 20 minutes of it dropping. And then when I did finally finish the full video covering all of it, it was another massive problem where now I only did it out of an obligation because people called me out, and then I also got accused of being a transphobe because I didn't use Ava Tyson's preferred pronouns, which were she, her. I
could have swore that Ava's pronouns were like whatever at this point. Maybe that changed.
Know that. I thought just calling Ava Tyson by her name was okay, and I had also heard when I went to the Mr. Beast thing, someone refer to Ava Tyson with they. So I was truly under-
Yeah, you can refer to anybody with they, even if they're not they are not non-binary. That's what I do. Like, if I don't know, I'll call somebody them. Like, who gives a shit?
The impression that that was okay. And for that, I was annihilated by a good chunk of Twitter. And then annihilated by another good chunk of Twitter because I called out Sneako, who was the main proponent about me covering for Mr. Beast to keep the collab alive.
Well, Sneako was like desperately fishing for attention from MoistCritical because he really has nothing left. I mean, he's on his way down. He's never going to have another pop in any meaningful capacity.
I wasn't talking about Ava Tyson because I wanted the Mr. Beast collab. And I talked about how absurd that statement was, especially given his history with fighting against the age of consent.
It's so funny because, like, it's interesting because the Ava Chris Tyson thing, definitely reasonable criticisms. I don't think Ava Chris Tyson should be a content creator. I don't think that they should have access to the internet. They're very clearly extraordinarily stupid. From what I've seen, they're not a groomer, but they made extraordinarily inappropriate jokes. The Shadman thing was a meme back then, which is really weird and creepy, but apparently I've seen some other big creators that I like enjoy that like used to meme it as well. It's like, okay. I would need to see explicit chat conversations of them like actually like grooming, right? Because the way that they were talking could be one of two things. It could be, well, I want to say this, and I don't want you to think I'm a fucking asshole. Sounds like a lot of the jokes are jokes you would typically see a very edgy boy make. I'm not trying to be rude. A lot of extraordinarily edginess that people made. Like when I was like younger, you know, I remember make edgy jokes too. Not lolicon jokes, but and not, you know, I was usually the kid, not like, to be honest, like, this was years ago. This was like way long ago, you know. And we'd make jokes. I would be like 14, and I'd play with like 20-year-olds. I'm playing like World of Warcraft, right? And like, you know, they would make like fucking stupid jokes, and like nobody cared or whatever, right? And so maybe I'm biased because I'm older, you know. But they could be just extraordinarily edgy jokes, which you shouldn't be a content creator if you're making that kind of shit. Or they could be like a legitimate attempt at trying to wear down a young person's boundaries and make them more comfortable with sexual conversation to try to sexually exploit them. The thing is, I haven't seen any of the actual sexual exploitation part. And so until we see that, I can't call Chris Tyson, Ava Chris Tyson, like an actual groomer. Like, I need to see that. You could be upset with that. That's fine. But like, I've always been I'd have to see that. But when this all happened, Mr. Beast got an extraordinary amount of flack. And what happens online is people go fucking insane, and all of a sudden Mr. Beast is now bad. That's what you have to say, or else like you're wrong. And that Mr. Beast video that came out, like, obviously I was very skeptical of it. A lot of the criticism seems stupid. Like, one of the criticisms was that like Mr. Beast is selling candy and sugar's bad for kids, so he's had a negative impact on kids. You know, there was the idea that there was a potential lottery scam going on, which could have been true, but I would need an actual, like, let the FTC get involved. But I don't even know where I was going with this. But things just get out of control crazy. I forget exactly where I was going with this, but I've noticed that like Mr. Beast is now pushing to sue for like defamation of character, and people are like, "Oh, that's a bad look." Why? If it's actually defamatory, how is it a bad look? Like, I'm just saying, it seems interesting. But if you don't have a particular take when you're supposed to have a particular take, people get fucking very upset and they start like melting down and crying. It's very interesting how the internet works. So
he's been very vocal about how much he hates the age of consent. And so I talked about that briefly at the end of the video, which then changed the whole narrative for a lot of people, where I never talked about Ava Tyson and only talked about Sneako. So it was a complete lose-lose, because if I didn't talk about what Sneako was saying, I would have been called a coward for not addressing it and talking about, like, well, he was going to cover for Mr. Beast until Sneako called him out. So, like, if I didn't do it, I would have been attacked. I did do it, still got attacked. It really was unwinnable. But from that spawned a conversation where I talked to Sneako directly, because he was very upset that I was talking about how him rallying against the age of consent is pedophile arguments, like defending pedophilia. As I've said since the very beginning,
it may be, or it could be hemophilic. It's predatory. It doesn't matter. It's predatory.
In this channel, I'm always willing to engage with people I disagree with, and I thought that maybe there was a chance I misunderstood what he was trying to say, even though it's still abhorrent. I thought, okay, maybe he's not actually trying to defend pedophilia. He's like some kind of pseudo-intellectual debate bro who's trying to
Well, I think it's both of those things.
say something else. So I was willing to hear him out.
I don't think Sneako wants to sleep with kids. I think Sneako, this is his current grift, and like this is what he's doing, and he feels like he has to lean into it.
On it, and I talked to him in DMs, and he said he doesn't believe in the age of consent. He believes in the age of marriage. Can't assign a number to it, but said that when someone can legally
something. Why can't you say what the age of consent should be? That's what Charlie says. People should legally drive and marry at the same age. No, these are two separate issues. But when it comes to driving, generally speaking, like you have a permit when you're like under a minor, and so you can only drive during certain times, usually during the day. I don't know all the restrictions, so you know, like I said, like it's okay for like two 16-year-olds to interact. It's not okay for like a 16 and like a 23-year-old to interact, right? So, is the driver's permit age 15 or driver's license age 16? As Muslims, we believe it's our duty to follow the law of the land. It wasn't a spiritual question. I have no issues with faith at all. Yeah, okay, I gotcha. It's just like a bunch of bullshit.
Drive, they should be able to marry at the same time, which is literally like a 15 or 16-year-old, because you get your permit at 15, your license at 16, and both are way too young to be marrying. That shit is completely unacceptable. It is downright disgusting. He then said that he was happy to discuss it in a call, which I said I was willing to hear him out on, and he said that he would do it later because he was outside doing an IRL stream in Turkey. So I was willing to hear him out, because again, if this is some kind of crazy misunderstanding, I'd like to know that, because it'd be really fucking scary for someone in his position with his level of influence to be actually advocating for adults marrying and fucking children.
Well, yeah, he is. That is his whole thing.
That's a huge problem. That's a big fucking problem. So if there was something that he was like trying to say but failing to do so, I was willing to at least hear it. And this is where the infamous debate came from. The debate that people are calling the debate of the century. I'm kidding, not a single soul on the planet said that. It's actually
I was about to say, yeah, no.
one of the most dogshit debates I think human beings have ever had. He eventually called me on Discord. I was under the impression this was just him and I talking. I had no idea this was going to be a debate. I thought he was going to try and explain himself like, hey, no, this isn't actually what I meant. This is what I'm trying to say. I thought...
Oh, well, that's, I guess you're just a little too charitable to the fucking weirdest fuck in the world.
I thought this was a conversation between him and I, not this kind of debate show that he was putting on for his audience. There is nothing in our DMs that indicated that's where it was going. When I joined the call, he asked if I was going to record it, to which I said, I can if he wants me.
I'm like confused. Like, why wouldn't you expect it to be like a debate show? I don't understand. Like, you're talking to Sneako. At the very least, like, you're way too charitable to a fucking loser. I don't really understand that. That part's bizarre to me.
Too, but I was also down to just talk. So I thought maybe he wanted it as a recording to like explain to people like, no, he's not actually a pedophile defender or advocating for that kind of thing. So I thought that is why he asked. I didn't know it was because it was being streamed, especially because one of his last DMs was about how he's doing an outside IRL stream and he would call me after. To me, that says when he's done streaming, that's when we'll talk, not as a part of his stream. I didn't.
Well, I mean, you should have probably... It just seems like some of these are just the weirdest dumb mistakes I've ever heard somebody make. Like, why wouldn't you expect these things?
No, this was a debate nor a stream until about an hour.
Why would he talk to another big content creator and not stream it? Like, I don't understand. That part doesn't really, like, it doesn't really add up to me, like, that you'd think that. I mean, no, I mean, I believe he thinks that. I just super ignorant. You would think you wouldn't, considering how long you've been on the internet. I don't get it.
We're in 40 into it, roughly somewhere in that ballpark. I am not a debater. I've never claimed to be one. I never want to be a debater. I've always said that I believe conversations are the most productive because debates always devolve into what side can score the most points by explaining their thought process, even if the position is wrong. Whereas a conversation is a very different thing to me. So I didn't even know that's what this was. So, obviously, I was unprepared for a fucking debate. So I entered into the Thunderdome and we started talking. I made it clear that I found his statements on the age of consent and children marrying adults being fucking hideous. Absolutely revolting. And then he started arguing about, well, what is a child? We must define a child.
You think he's lying because he got washed out? Yeah, that's possible. I mean, that's possible.
No, it's not actually being under 18. It's all a bunch of hooey. And I really think if you have to start arguing about, well, what technically is a child, you're already way too far gone. Like, that is so fucking weird. And in no uncertain terms, multiple times throughout the debate, Sneako says that he is okay with people that are aged 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 marrying adults that
this is the problem. This is
are 18 or older.
This is the problem, though. You have to be like, this is one of the biggest problems in the debate with him is like you have to set these terms. So, like, instead of being like, okay, what do you think about a 13-year-old and a 23-year-old? Charlie would be like, well, what do you think about, like, maybe a 14, 15-year-old that's marrying, like, an adult? It's like, these are so vague, you need to be more specific. You know, you're kind of failing at that. You need to be specific about numbers so you can catch them more easily. We did get him to say 12 and 20. That's good, which is disgusting. But, like, you know, that would have been a little bit easier if you know, kind of came out of the gate with that.
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for, I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore, anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
See, like, anybody in their adult, 15 or 16, like, make him, because you could be like 16 and 18 sounds reasonable to people. You have to get him on, like, 20, like 15 and 25. Like, Jesus Christ, you know?
21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved? Why should we get the government involved?
Because people, that's how kids get hurt. So the government has to get involved. Like, okay.
And get back a little bit. Do you think there's not a problem with a child being with an adult?
Okay. We haven't even agreed upon what a child and an adult is. You keep saying that's 18.
Under 18.
That's
child.
And I'm telling you, that's not even the definition of the word.
What is the number? It needs to be a number, or else you can do the same thing.
I just told you there's not a number.
But do you see why that's a problem?
No.
If there's no defined... So why can't a 12-year-old marry an 18-year-old?
Because most 12-year-olds haven't gone through puberty yet. And
most 14-year-olds haven't gone through it yet either. They're still in the middle of it. That's two different things.
most 12-year-olds...
What if, as you just said, it changes. What if a 12-year-old went through puberty early, the parents consent, the 18-year-old and the parents consent? Can they do it?
Most likely that's not going to happen. You know why? Because Islamically...
We're not talking most likely. Just say it.
If the families have consented, the kid is mature, the kid is ready... Why should I stop
at 12 years old. At 12 years old.
If the kid is physically mature, the parents consent, both parties are happy.
Nobody physically matures at 12 years old. It's crazy.
12-year-old being physically mature.
If that's the only line that actually makes sense.
Again, I don't think a 14-year-old can ever be physically mature.
It doesn't really matter because we're not even just talking about physical, right? We talk about mental as well, but okay.
Mm-hmm. Even though they literally can. Even though puberty actually defines that, it's fine.
I don't believe so. I was 14 once. I actually had
Me too.
a mustache when I was 14. Would you have looked at me and said I was physically mature enough to get married?
If you were physically mature, if you were mature, yes, I would. Okay.
There's no 14-year-old that's physically mature. You don't finish physically maturing until you're like 16 or 17 years old. But again, it's not just about physical maturity. It's about mental maturity as well. So, Jesus Christ.
Really? If you're 14.
Yeah. If you were 14 and you were ready to go and you met another 14-year-old, yes.
You were ready to go, baby. Holy fuck.
No. We're talking adults. You keep going back to that.
That is adult.
I met...
I told you my definition.
Oh,
I told you the definition.
Adult.
The definition. Okay. If you went through puberty, you're an adult. That's the definition of adult. So yes, if you're an adult and you had a mustache, you're ready to get married, fine. Okay?
Well,
unironically saying a 14-year-old adult, I think would make most sensible people want to puke. There's so many instances of this, and a lot of the conversation was spent with him talking about like overseas age of consent, like talking about how Japan's age of consent was 13 for the longest time. This
Gross.
And that.
I mean, Japan also has like fucking train cars just for women because of how fucked up some of the society could be. And this is the problem. In a lot of these societies where this is the norm, it's not just like, hey, a 16-year-old can get married to a 22-year-old. It's like those societies are also have extraordinarily limited rights to people who aren't men, right? So there's an additional layer here, right? Like a lot of these other countries, it's not like just, oh, let's just do that. No, it's like you're having an arranged marriage with somebody and you get no power. Divorce is not legal. Women are property. They don't have a say in pretty much anything. So it's not the same.
The whole thing was like pulling teeth, and it was fucking painful. And I think it's extremely alarming perspective to have. Unironically, calling a 14-year-old and 12-year-old mature enough for a marriage, those are middle schoolers. Like, holy shit. I think that is extremely concerning to be advocating for something like that. Like, would Sneako be okay if his best friend ended up marrying a 14-year-old? He certainly shouldn't be. No one should be okay with something like that. Like, that's fucking terrible. That is actually terrible. But now, since I wasn't like holding him to this topic or making sure it stayed on the topic I thought we were talking about, it went all over the place with a ton of different things. But the big one, and this is what most people have focused on, which was my response to his question about kids transitioning. And the way he would pose that question would be by asking if I thought it was okay if kids who want to switch their gender go to the doctor and get their dick cut off.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of a no-brainer. You probably should have been able to be like, well, nobody at 9 should get their dick cut off, and nobody is getting their dick cut off, so...
Is it okay if a 9-year-old goes to a doctor and gets their cock cut off right then and there? And when posed with that question, I replied with yes. And I've talked about this on stream many, many times now, and I'll talk about it again here. I thought he was talking in hyperbole.
It's so hard. I really just don't think I believe all these. I think, maybe he thought that. I don't know. I think that, like, I think his heart's in the right place. Like, yeah, I think that people can... I've already explained my whole take on it. I'm not doing it again. Like, yeah, I think that this can happen as long as it's facilitated by, like, a doctor and yada yada. I believe he feels that way. But, like, come on. You didn't think it would be... like, first of all, you're in the debate for an hour, and you didn't think, like, this guy's debating me. He's not just having a conversation. I should probably respond with an understanding of that. You didn't think that? And like, okay, I have to be very specific about terms. He was pushing on terms. I don't understand. Because you come off looking so stupid when it comes to that. It's fucking crazy.
I thought he was just exaggerating, being over the top, talking about the entire subject of transitioning. I had no idea that any living, breathing human being actually thought that that's how transitioning works.
I don't know. I kind of still believe Charlie thought that was... how transitioning works. I don't know, man. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Where you just go into a doctor saying, I feel like switching genders, and they lay you down on the operating table and just snip your whole fucking meat off. I didn't know that that's what he actually believed. I didn't know he was speaking literally.
He doesn't believe that, but that's what he wants people to believe, right? So, like, just be clear. Sneako believes very little of the things that he says, but he wants you, like, he's playing onto people's fears. Like, he wants you to believe that that's real. So he presents it in that way. Thank you so much for the 20-month small gut from Diabetic Survivor. Remember when Sneako disavowed fans' transphobia? Not really. I remember when he was like, he had some fucking crazy fans that were talking about like killing gay people, and he's like, no, wait, remember that.
I thought he was just referring to the entire process of transitioning and just using this over-the-top statement to encapsulate all of it. Because you literally cannot get that surgery unless you are 18.
I think that's the case for bottom surgery. I think that's the case for bottom surgery. For top surgery, you might be able to get that earlier, which I don't think you should be able to. Like, again, like for specifically surgeries, I'm against you getting that as like a, before 18. But I understand hormones more.
Yeah, like, you actually have to go out of your way to be that stupid on the topic than you would just spending a couple of seconds looking it up. There are very rare cases where someone under 18 has had that surgery performed. That's not common. So I really didn't think that someone could be so dumb on the topic. I thought...
Come on. You've been on the internet more than most people. There's no way that you believe this. But you know, I guess this is how he's bowing out of it. His arguments, I was kind of stupid.
He was just speaking in hyperbole, which is my mistake. I should have been more clear instead of making an assumption that he was talking about something nuanced in an over-the-top way. I haven't hid this take, and it's not a new take from me. I've talked about this a couple times throughout the years on stream. I have no complaints if a kid gets interested in transitioning and starts talking to their family about it. So their parents start talking to doctors, the kid starts talking to doctors and therapists and all of this, because the process of transitioning is one that takes place over the course of many years. It's not something that just happens like that. And I'm also not afraid to admit that I am not the most educated when it comes to transitioning. I am not someone that has a ton of knowledge about the subject to be speaking on it in a really in-depth manner. But even I know these very surface level things that everyone has easy access to understand. It is a long process, and I have no problems at all if a kid gets interested in that process and starts going through that process with proper care.
Yeah, I mean, the process, it's an interesting thing, right? Because like it's like when it comes to getting surgeries, like I said, you shouldn't get that before 18. But the process, I don't know that it's necessarily super long. Like if you're 12 years old, let's say, and or let's say you're 13, you're going through puberty, and like you're having a significant amount of distress associated with like going through your puberty, and you go to the doctor, and you know, they're not necessarily going to wait years before they start treating you. They might start treating you immediately because they see that you're having a significant amount of distress. But it's the same thing as like if I go to the doctor and I'm having issues with my blood pressure, they're not going to say, give it a couple months and you'll go on this blood pressure medication. They're going to go like, okay, let's start like dealing with this right now, and see, you know, kind of how it goes. You know, and that's why it's important to have very educated doctors who know what they're doing to make sure they properly diagnose. But, you know, it's not all the process is necessarily wrong. You know, if you go on hormone blockers and it's not for you and you go back through your normal transition, like I don't think there's any data that says that there are any like long-term negative impacts of going on puberty blockers for like a relatively short amount of time, like maybe a year or so.
And then when they reach the age where they can consider that surgery and decide they want to do it, then that's all power to them. That's entirely up to them. They have reached that age. They can now do that surgery if they want to. That is not a surgery that's being offered to like a 9-year-old who just says, I feel like changing genders today. It's just not how it
never
works.
Would be.
And I didn't think that that's what was actually being discussed because it's so fucking silly. Now, I'm sure there's some really fringe cases you can point to where that kind of thing did happen, but it's not common. Thus, I didn't think that's what was being referred to in the conversation. And it is, again, my mistake for not recognizing that at that moment, it was being spoken about literally.
Well, all right. It seems like a weird mistake, but sure.
So all that shit that people keep dogpiling and spouting about me about how I want all kids to go out there and get their genitals chopped off is just
based.
Fucked up. Like, it's so ridiculous. I recognize I did a horrible job of arguing in this debate, which isn't surprising considering I don't debate. This is not something that's in my skill set, which of course led to some embarrassingly dogshit arguments. Like the one I've seen people reference a couple times is when I briefly mentioned sports in this topic. It was a stupid point to try and make. I was getting hit by like some rebound psychic damage listening to some of the drivel brain rot that Sneako was spouting about the age of consent. And I don't know why I thought this was like an argument to try and make, but I brought up sports in this subject and I was going to try and elaborate on it, but didn't at all. What I was going to try and say is that when a kid gets interested in a sport, they'll talk to their parents about it, they'll research the sport, you know, go through the process of learning about it. And
I don't think that the sports take's ever going to really be justifiable, just to be clear. It was a weird take. Although you can make an argument about how football can lead to having like a fucking traumatic brain injury that could, you know, significantly reduce your quality of life. So, you know, what is more dangerous, being trans or playing football? I don't really know.
When it comes to transitioning, it's still a process where you talk to your family about it, you learn about it. Like, it was a...
The best way to have engaged in the conversation with Sneako here probably would have been to just be like, I'm not talking about trans issues. You're literally talking about fucking like raping kids. Because that's the truth. That is the truth of what's going on. Like, we're gonna stick to that topic. We're not gonna flip on a dime. That's what you're talking about. You know, don't even go into like the engagement with that. That's possibly how I would have talked about it. You know,
like it wasn't a point where I was trying to say, well, change.
Because sometimes you just need to like not engage in some arguments when you're talking to somebody, especially when they're arguments that are meant to bring things off of topic. Like your take is that like it's okay to molest children. That's what it is. Like it's mega grooming. You're okay with kids getting like forced into a relationship and get like mega groomed. So let's stick to that instead of talking about fucking trans issues.
Changing genders is a lot like picking between baseball and soccer. Like, it's not what I was trying to get
Sorry.
at, but because I didn't elaborate on it and it really wasn't a good argument to try and make in the first place, that's one people have harped on a lot. And I get it. Like I said, I am not a debater. Like, I didn't go in here expecting a debate. So I had nothing prepared here for this inundation of outrageous questions and tangents. Like, there was a point where Sneako was trying to get me to say white power. Like, the whole thing was a fucking mess. It was, without a doubt, probably the worst debate that video has ever been cursed with. And I really regret not doing a better job here. It's not something I should have even done in the first place. I just have a tendency to really hope for the best out of people, and I was really hoping that I and most people were wrong about Sneako's perspective on the age of consent. However, unfortunately, it doesn't appear to be the case. He was very adamant about this position. And
Social transition would be okay at younger ages. Yeah, I mean, I have no issues with socially transitioning. Like, it's just like it's like socially transitioning. There's no hormones involved. There's nothing wrong with that. I have no issue with social transitioning at all.
I did a terrible job in arguing with him, and I did a terrible job of articulating my beliefs. I am supportive of the LGBTQ+. And
Are you a
I
sassy
have been,
baka?
and that's not something I've been shy about.
He does look like he might be LGBTQ a little bit with that long hair. Am I right, guy? Am I right, conservatives? All right, that's a little stupid. Miss 100% of the shots you don't take, am I right?
just wish I did a better job of expressing that.
Yeah, it's probably important because like it's kind of the reality. Every time you're having a conversation online about it, especially with the magnitude of theirs, I mean they're big creators, especially MoistCritical. You have to like there's going to be this understanding like you're speaking for a lot of people and you want to speak accurately, and this definitely riled up some like fucking obnoxious transphobia. So.
To be open and honest here, and I've talked about this a lot, I've always treated my channel kind of like a diary for myself, which is why I just talk about so much different nonsense and so many things that I know a lot of people don't give a fuck about, but some of it's fun for me to talk about, or some of it's just things I care about. So being totally honest, I used to treat the internet as an escape from my dog shit real life. Truly unhappy, really hated most of everything about myself, and the internet was my escape from it. But now it's really become that real life is the escapism for me now. Like, I love posting and creating things, but I don't like interacting with the internet around me anymore. And it's something that I started to realize a couple months ago, and I've talked about it on stream a little bit, how because I've covered so many like drama stories and everything, it's pretty much all that I ever get told about when I'm streaming, and it's become such a massive headache. And
Yeah, I get that. It can just be annoying sometimes. I understand that completely. So
it's just constant negativity that I'm fully flooded with, like at all hours. Like, I am in like this human centipede of eating someone's ass while having my ass eaten, with even more things that I'm being demanded to like talk about, where everything just feels
it do be paying the bills though, am I right, guys?
like a lose-lose, and it has been for like the last 6 or 8 months, I feel, where if I talk about something, it's a problem. Even if something is cut and dry, as like Cody Ko having sex with a 17-year-old being bad, I caught
Allegedly having sex, but yeah, sure.
a lot of shit for that too. I'm sure a lot of people probably didn't see that, but man, the amount of emails I got and a lot of the things I was seeing, even something as cut and dry as that was an issue when I talked about it. And then if I don't talk about something, or if I don't talk about something fast enough in the time that some people think is...
I will say I find it interesting. I'm just gonna say, like, I find it interesting that like I've seen Charlie have some pretty, you know, obviously like pedophile bad takes. I totally agree, guys. Just clap for me. But then you listen to a guy talking about fucking kids, and you're like, let me be charitable to this guy. Oh, come on. You think somebody that's justifying like molesting children in like forced marriages, in forced grooming marriages, is gonna have like a reasonable take? You know, you gotta amp up that animosity a little bit there, buddy. You know. Thank you for the $2 from Sleepy. Did you see that Soluminati return? No, I didn't even know he left. This fucking guy's weird as hell.
Is appropriate, I'm then accused of covering up for something for an ulterior evil motive. So it just really feels like a rock and a hard place where, regardless, it's just going to be a massive flood of negativity. And a huge critique of me that I've always seen is Charlie's a fence sitter. He's just a fucking fence-sitting, enlightened, centrist cuck, this and that. And I've always said for the entire time I've been on the internet, I'm not special. I'm literally just a normal guy who got very lucky. I just sit here, joke about shit, talk about my opinion on things, and nothing else. I don't have a unique perspective on things. I don't have deep insight into the vicissitudes.
Well, I think it's because he typically takes like the safer like takes, you know, which is fine. Like, do you? Like I said, I'm not even like criticizing him, but he doesn't really do political takes. There's a lot of people though in like the gaming, you know, adjacent spheres that are a little regressive. It's a lot of younger people, especially like younger men. Young men typically struggle with empathy and like understanding of some of these like more mental health science topics and stuff, and so like yeah, that's probably why it comes off like that way. He seems like a normal dude that's like he's generally progressive, like normal, like most people are, I'd say, reasonably, but his audience is a little less regressive, or excuse me, a little less progressive, especially because they tend to be a little younger and more video game oriented. So
vicissitudes of certain things. I am literally just a guy who yaps, has some fun, talks about shit, does some wacky stuff as well. and that's it. It's just not that deep. But because everything is so inflammatory and charged online, it's being perceived in the last, I'd say like the last 2 years, it's really popped off as me making deliberate attempts to appease both sides and play right down the middle to soak up as much as possible. Like it's all this like nefarious scheme where I'm doing this with my hands. And I just don't understand how it's become so incendiary, where that's apparently like a really bad thing now. My opinion is not special, and my opinion isn't one that's pandering to any sides or catering to anything. It's literally just whatever's up here. I sit down for like 30 to 45 minutes on like a topic or like a video that I'm joking around about, and I talk about it. I am legitimately just an average, well, below average height guy who's about to turn 30. I'm not just...
Whoa! Damn, I'm fucking 34, brother. Terrible stuff.
Spitting hot takes out the wazoo here. I'm just being myself. That's all this channel ever has been. And now it's become super controversial to do that if it's not like, you know, picking sides on everything, it seems. And it's very frustrating. For the longest time, it was just me having fun. And for the most part, it still is. But I've started to recognize over the last few months that some of the things I do just really aren't fun for me to do, and I've been doing them out of obligation. Mainly internet drama. When I initially started covering drama so many years ago now, it was fun, because it wasn't as serious. Like, the stories were a lot, you know, more quirky. It was easy to get invested because it was kind of just like a soap opera, like a really...
Well, they're probably more benign. I mean, nowadays, these topics of conversation are super loaded. Like, a pretty popular one is talking about pedophiles and stuff, and it can burn you out. Like, I used to do a lot more of that stuff. I still do cover stuff like that every once in a while, but I used to do a lot more of that stuff, and it would burn me the fuck out, talking about, like, traumatic situations for people. It would fuck me up. You know what I mean? I used to be involved with, like, canceling people on TikTok that would do some fucked up shit. Like, it would burn me the fuck out. Like, there's a lot going on. That might sound selfish, but I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just let me take a step back and just kind of not engage with this because it's fucking me up, you know?
Dumb soap opera. But recently it's been much more serious, and I feel the need to talk about these things because a lot of them are extremely serious with very important topics to discuss. But it has become draining. As much as I never wanted to admit it, I've started to recognize that my mood is immediately impacted by whatever I read on Twitter in the morning. If that's some horrible stuff about a creator or what have you, it immediately affects my entire day and my whole outlook on the day. Now I know, wah, call the wambulance, get some french fries, just fucking whining about having to talk about drama. What a stupid problem to be upset about. But I'm just trying to explain that it hasn't been as fun recently. It hasn't.
Yeah, I get that.
And the main thing, if you've been around the channel for a while, is I've always wanted this to be fun and never feel like a job. And as hard as it is for me to admit this, a lot of this kind of stuff, it has just started to feel like less fun and more of, well, gotta do this because I'm expected to. Like, anytime I go live, most of chat is just telling me about the latest in whatever's happening in the creator space or some other, like, extremely negative thing.
Yeah, like, Dr. Disrespect came back, and he's just being weird. I don't know. People are making fun of him because he's talking to a fucking minor. And then people are just being, he's just responding with, like, when you just said something like, oh, you're trans and depressed to some person, it's like, okay, great. What a response. Incredible.
Going on, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to learn all about that once I turn stream off, so then I spend a few hours learning about these things, and it's all just really upsetting stuff. Like, it's not happy, it's all very sad, bad stuff. And it's...
Yeah, the best controversy we had recently was when that Goop Videos guy smacked the fuck out of that one cameraman because he was being an asshole. That was great. I loved that. That's fun stuff, always.
Me not happy. So I definitely think I'll be slowing down on covering internet-related drama or, like, drama in general. I'll still talk about, like, really wacky stories and shit like that, but I definitely think I'm gonna be pumping the brakes on, like, the kind of drama I have been covering recently. And instead, I'm going to go back to focusing on the content that I'm most happy with. Like, if you ask me what content I'm most proud of throughout my entire time on this platform for the last, like, 17, 18 years, none of it would be drama coverage. It'd be things like Skynut. It'd be things like shooting a potato at a tennis racket to see if you can make french fries in midair by frying them in hot oil. It's shit like that. And I think I'm going to go back to that kind of stuff as opposed to the direction that I have been going recently.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It also makes sense that he'd have to announce this to his audience because, like, we're talking about, like, there's an expectation of him to deliver, the expectation of him to actually talk about all these topics. So if he doesn't say, like, hey, you know what, I'm just going to take a break from this stuff because it's burning me the fuck out, which is totally normal and understandable, he's got to be like, guys, I'm going to do this. I got to let you know because I don't want you to think I'm cowering away from this particular topics, you know?
Certainly. So, yeah, this was a lot to go over here, but I hope this has cleared everything up, and yeah, that's really about it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds fine. Nothing he said was, like, wrong. I don't know if I believe that. I'm not sure I believe that he actually I don't know. I don't know. I think I don't know, man. I think some of it was like a little excuse. Like I didn't think he was speaking literally. I feel like maybe you did, and you just didn't want to call it out or something, or I don't know. Either way, it doesn't really matter. It was fine. You know, it also makes sense. He's gonna stay away from some of like the fucking obnoxious online shit. So yeah, man, cool video, brothers.